The champagne hit her face not like a slap, but like a wall. It wasn't the cold that shocked her or the sting in her eyes. It was the silence that followed the crash of glass. The moment where 200 people decided whether to be humans or an audience. They chose audience. Henrietta Martinez was a ghost in a starched white shirt. At the Grand Palazzo, invisibility wasn't a side effect of the job. It was the job. See everything, be seen by nothing. Move through the forest of tuxedos and silk without rustling a leaf. For 3 years, she'd perfected it. For her sister Rosa's nursing degree. For the quiet life that came after survival. Tonight's forest was particularly dense. A tech billionaire's acquisition party at table 12. The man, Peter Banks, wore his money like armor, loud and shiny. Henrietta served their table, her presence registering only as a delay between an empty glass and a full one. Across the room, a man watched the ghost. Frederico Porto sat at his usual corner table. He noted her efficiency, the precise angle of the poured wine, the way she navigated crowded spaces without a brushed elbow. He saw the art in her invisibility and the cost of it. Henrietta felt his gaze like a spotlight in the dark. She kept her eyes on her tray. When Peter Banks ordered the Cristal, his voice was a command. She brought the bottle, the ritual second nature, present, twist, pour. He snatched it from her hands. Ibiza trick, he announced to his table. The room's noise dipped. A few heads turned, smiling in anticipation of a wealthy man's amusement. Henrietta stood in the wreckage. Champagne dripped from her hair, her nose, her chin. Her shirt was plastered transparent to her skin. She was no longer a ghost. She was an exhibit. Through the burning blur in her eyes, she saw the maitre d' hurrying over, his face a portrait of professional dismay, not at the cruelty, but at the scene. And she saw, with crystalline clarity, Frederico Porto rise from his seat, not with haste, with the terrible, slow certainty of a final verdict being delivered. The chair's scrape cut through the laughter like a blade. Silence fell, absolute and suffocating. He was looking only at Peter Banks. The silence was a physical thing, thick and charged. Every eye followed Frederico as he walked. His footsteps were the only sound. He stopped behind Peter's chair. Peter's grin faltered as he registered the sudden chill at his back, the dead quiet of his friends. Without looking at him, Frederico removed his suit jacket. He stepped around the chair, closing the distance to Henrietta. He did not touch her. Instead, he draped his jacket, a fine wool worth more than her monthly rent, over her trembling shoulders. The fine wool was heavy, warm, and it covered the soaked, clinging shirt. Then he turned, looked at Peter. His voice was a low, calm rumble in the cavernous quiet. "Pick it up." Peter blinked, his bravado momentarily stunned. "What?" Frederico nodded to the bottle he still clutched in Peter's hand. "The bottle you took from her. Pick up the glasses you made her drop." A nervous titter escaped one of Peter's companions, quickly stifled. Peter's face flushed crimson. "You must be joking. I'm not—" "You are." Frederico took a single step closer. His posture remained relaxed, but his eyes held a promise that made the air taste like metal. "You will pick up every piece, with your hands, now." The command left no room for negotiation. It was not a request, it was a verdict. Henrietta, shrouded in the foreign scent of another man's wealth and power, watched Peter Banks's reality fracture. She saw the moment he understood. His money was just paper here. His smirk vanished, replaced by a dawning, humiliated terror. He looked from Frederico's implacable face to the glittering shards at his own feet, a servant's task awaiting his millionaire hands. Frederico did not move. He simply waited, a king observing a subject's obedience. And Peter, his empire of arrogance crumbling in the silent gaze of 200 witnesses, slowly, stiffly began to kneel. Peter's knees hovered an inch above the polished floor, his body rigid with the shock of his own submission. The shards of crystal glittered like accusation around his designer shoes. A choked sound, half gasp, half sob, escaped him. He looked up, not at Frederico, but at Henrietta. His eyes weren't pleading, they were burning with a new, more dangerous emotion, a hatred born of shame. She was the mirror, and he despised his own reflection. "Is this what you want?" He spat at her, his voice trembling with fury. "To watch me crawl?" Henrietta's fingers clenched in the fine wool of Frederico's jacket. The warmth felt foreign, a shield she hadn't asked for. She saw the raw humiliation in Peter's face, and a treacherous, unexpected pang twisted in her gut. This wasn't justice, it was a spectacle, a power play where she was just the pawn. Frederico spoke, his voice still that terrifying calm. "This is not about what she wants. This is about what you owe. You broke what was hers. You will mend it." But the spell was cracking. The public degradation was tipping from consequence into cruelty. Henrietta saw the other diners, some averting their eyes in discomfort, others leaning forward, hungry for the next act of the drama. She was no longer the victim of a millionaire's joke, she was the centerpiece in a mafia boss's lesson. Peter's breathing was ragged. He looked from Henrietta's pity-stricken face to Frederico's impassive one, a caged animal seeking the weaker target. "Fine," he hissed. He reached out a shaking hand, his fingers hovering over a large, jagged piece of a champagne flute. Then he stopped. His hand closed into a fist, pulling back from the glass. He looked up at Frederico, a spark of desperate defiance in his eyes. "Or what?" he whispered, the challenge hanging in the dead air. "You'll break my hands in front of all these people?" The question hung there, a gauntlet thrown. It asked everything. How far would this man go? What were the true rules of this dark, elegant world? Was this about her dignity, or was it about his authority? Frederico's expression did not change, but the silence deepened, becoming a weight that pressed on every chest in the room. Henrietta held her breath. The jacket on her shoulders felt like a chain. What happens when humiliation demands a price that even justice cannot afford to pay? The compromise hung in the air, a financial settlement that felt like both victory and surrender. Peter seized it like a lifeline. Fine, done. He scrambled to his feet, brushing imaginary dust from his knees, his eyes avoiding Henrietta completely. The transaction restored some familiar ground, a problem solved with money. But as Peter turned to leave, Frederico's voice stopped him, quieter now, a steel thread in the silence. "Not to the restaurant, to her, directly. You will get her information from the manager and process it tonight. I will know if you delay." Peter gave a stiff, furious nod and fled after his friends, scattering like startled birds. The moment he was gone, the tension in the room didn't break, it shifted. All that remained was Henrietta, standing in the wreckage, wrapped in a stranger's jacket, and the man who had appointed himself her judge and jury. The maitre d' approached, his expression now of pure anxiety. "Miss Martinez, let's get you to the back, get you cleaned up." "No." The word was soft but clear. It came from Henrietta. She shouldered off the heavy wool jacket, holding it out to Frederico. The air felt cold without it. "Thank you," she said, her voice gaining strength, though her hands still shook. "But I don't need your jacket, or your intervention."
Frederico accepted the jacket, his dark eyes studying her with new interest. He saw not just the humiliation now, but the defiance beneath it. He was going to walk away, Frederico said. They all were. I know. She looked at the puddle of champagne, the glittering shards. But what happens now? He pays me, he's banned, and tomorrow you're a story he tells at a different bar about the crazy old mobster, and I'm just the punchline with a better paycheck. She met his gaze. You didn't restore my dignity, you just made me a prize in your game. A profound silence followed. The diners watched, fascinated by this new, unexpected twist, the waitress turning on her savior. Frederico did not look offended. He looked, for the first time, uncertain. What would you have had me do? It was the question she hadn't let herself ask. Let him crawl? Let him walk? Both felt like defeat. Before she could answer, a young busboy rushed from the kitchen, eyes wide, heading straight for the manager. He whispered frantically, gesturing to his phone. The manager's face went ashen. He looked at Henrietta, then at Frederico, with sheer panic. Miss Martinez, the manager stammered. A guest. Filmed it. The whole thing. It's online. The air left the room. Henrietta's hard-won composure cracked. Going viral wasn't a consequence. It was an eternal sentence. Her humiliation, Peter's kneeling, Frederico's threat, it was all now public content. She turned back to Frederico, her earlier defiance dissolving into cold, sheer terror. Her private shame was now a global spectacle. Did his idea of justice just destroy her life forever? Henrietta stared at Frederico. Press charges? The words were a foreign language. Her world operated on different rules. Apologize, absorb, survive. The legal system was a distant country where people like Peter Banks had embassies, and people like her needed visas they could never afford. Her voice was a dry leaf. The weight of the video, now public, pressed down on her. Her humiliation had a view count. Her face was a meme. Pressing charges meant stepping into that spotlight permanently, her entire life dissected by strangers who'd already decided if she was a brave victim or a gold-digging punchline. Peter saw her hesitation and pounced, his fear morphing back into sneering calculation. See, she doesn't want trouble, she wants what they all want. He pulled a thick money clip from his pocket. Here, $5,000, cash, right now. You take it, you sign an NDA my lawyer has in his car, and we all forget this little performance ever happened. He fanned the crisp bills on the edge of the table. The gesture was more degrading than the champagne. It was the price of her silence, laid out like a bet. Frederico watched her, his earlier certainty gone. He had forced the confrontation, but this choice was a boulder only she could lift. The money is an admission of guilt, he said to her, quietly, but it also buys his silence and yours. The video is out. This can get much worse, or it can end here. Henrietta looked at the money. $5,000 was Rosa's next semester of books, a buffer against the electric bill, the first month's rent on a better apartment. It was survival. She looked at Peter's smug, relieved face. Taking the money meant he won. He'd learned nothing. He'd just found the price tag for cruelty and deemed it affordable. She looked at Frederico. His intervention had given her a moment of power, but it came wrapped in his own brand of menace, his own rules. Was she trading one powerful man's disregard for another's control? The restaurant watched, a collective jury. The maitre d' looked desperate for her to take the cash and make the scene end. The other waitstaff watched from the shadows of the kitchen door, their faces tense. They knew their jobs depended on the whims of men like Peter. Her choice would be their lesson, too. Henrietta's fingers, still sticky with champagne, curled into her palms. The sweet, cloying smell of it was everywhere, the scent of her own powerlessness. She took a step forward, not toward the money, but toward Peter. Her legs felt like water, but she locked her knees. "You think this is about money," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "It's not." She reached out, but not for the cash. Her hand hovered over the fan of bills. "What would you do? Take the money and seal your humiliation with a signature,
or throw it in his face and step into a firestorm you cannot control.
The compromise landed with perfect, devastating clarity. She had not rejected his money, she had redefined it. It was not payment for her silence, but restitution for his vandalism. She had accepted his terms, but rewritten the meaning. Peter stood frozen, the money clip still in his hand. He had been prepared for greed or righteousness, but not for this shrewd, dignified renegotiation. He had been outmaneuvered, not by the mobster, but by the waitress. "Fine," he choked out, slapping the stack of bills onto the table. "Take it. Consider your shoes compensated." The words were meant to be sarcastic, but they only cemented her victory. He turned on his heel and stormed out, his exit lacking any of his former swagger. The moment the door closed behind him, a collective exhale seemed to sweep through the Grand Palazzo. The performance was over. Forks began to clink again, conversations resumed in hushed, excited tones. They had a story to tell. Henrietta looked at the money. She did not pick it up. She turned to the manager. "For the broken glasses and the cleaning," she said, her voice now eerily steady, "and I'll need the rest of the night off." The manager nodded, a new, wary respect in his eyes. "Of course, Miss Martinez." Only then did she face Frederico again. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, part admiration, part something like regret. "That," he said quietly, "was masterful." "It was survival," she corrected. She felt the adrenaline beginning to drain, leaving a hollow, shaking cold behind. The video was still out there. Her face was still plastered online. Peter's hatred was now a concrete thing. "You gave me a stage, but the internet, that's a different kind of courtroom, one you can't control." For the first time, Frederico looked uncertain. The digital world was a frontier his old world power couldn't easily map. "I have resources, people who can mitigate such things." Mitigate? A brittle laugh escaped her. "You can't unbreak this. My mother will see it, my sister's classmates, every future employer." The full scope of the disaster was crashing down. The money on the table was meaningless against that tidal wave. She wrapped her arms around herself, the cold finally penetrating. "I need to go home." Frederico nodded. "My car is outside. It's the least—" No, the refusal was firm. "No more cars, no more jackets, no more interventions. I walk out of here alone, or this was all for nothing." She turned and walked toward the kitchen, past her gawking colleagues, head high but vision blurring. As she pushed through the swinging doors into the harsh fluorescent light of the service hallway, her composure shattered. She stumbled, catching herself against the wall, a dry, heaving sob wrenching from her chest. From the dining room, Frederico watched the doors swing shut behind her. He then glanced at the manager, his voice returning to its calm, imperious tone. "Ensure that money is in her hand tonight, and bring me the security footage from every phone in this room." He could control a restaurant with a look, but could he protect her from the storm that was just beginning to brew online? Henrietta absorbed his words, a line in the sand drawn in memory of a dead daughter. It was tragic, it was also terrifying. Her life had just been altered because she'd become a symbol in someone else's story of grief and atonement. "That video is online. My life is about to become public property because of your line. Where's the morality in that?" Frederico didn't dismiss her fear. He inclined his head. "A consequence I did not foresee. For that, I am sorry. Intentions do not erase outcomes." He slid a plain white business card across the desk. "This is Catherine Chen. She is the best defense attorney in the city. Her retainer is paid. She will handle the legal aspects, defamation, harassment, any fallout from the video. She can also advise you on your options regarding Mr. Banks." Henrietta stared at the card but didn't touch it. Accepting it felt like signing a contract with the shadows. "And what does this cost me?" "Nothing. Everything costs something." A faint, grim smile touched his lips. "Wisdom from the South Side. You're right. It costs me a debt to Catherine. It costs you the burden of my attention. But it does not indebt you to me. This is not a favor. It is—" He searched for the word. "Reparation, for my part in escalating your situation.
It was the most honest thing he'd said. He hadn't saved her, he'd ignited a different kind of fire. Henrietta picked up the card. The stock was thick, the engraving subtle. And after she handles things, what then? I go back to serving champagne with everyone knowing I'm the girl who got Porto involved?
No, Frederico said simply. He opened a desk drawer and removed a small sealed envelope. This is a letter of recommendation to the management of the Clarendon. It is a hotel, a legitimate one. They pay well, and their clientele is taught that staff are professionals, not props. The general manager is expecting your call if you choose to make it. He was offering her an escape hatch, a new identity, professionally speaking. It was more tempting than the lawyer. Why? She asked again, the envelope feeling heavy in her hand. Because my daughter believed in second chances, he said, his voice gravelly. And because what you did in there, taking his money on your terms, refusing my escort, showed a spine that most people in this city lost years ago. The world could use more of that, not less. He stood, signaling the end of the audience. The choice, Miss Martinez, is now entirely yours. Go back to the Grand Palazzo, go to the Clarendon, or walk away from both. But whatever you choose, he met her eyes, do not let them make you invisible again. Henrietta left the office, the card and envelope burning in her hand. In the hallway, the manager waited, holding a clean staff shirt and an envelope of cash. Your tips from tonight, he said, too quickly. The bills were too thick. It was the 5,000 plus more. She took it all, the clothes, the money, the offers. The weight was immense. As she pushed open the service entrance door to the alley, the cold night air hit her. Her phone, retrieved from her locker, was blinking with dozens of notifications. The first was a text from her sister Rosa. "Etta, is this you?" followed by a link. Henrietta didn't click it. She leaned against the damp brick wall, the smells of garbage and expensive perfume from the vent above mingling in the air. She had money, a lawyer, and a job offer from a Mafia boss, but standing in that dark alley, she had never felt more completely on her own. The Clarendon Hotel was a different kind of world. The silence here wasn't oppressive, it was respectful. The guests spoke in measured tones, the staff moved with a quiet assurance Henrietta had never known was possible in service. Her title was Guest Experience Coordinator. She had an office, small but hers, with a door that closed. Catherine Chen, the attorney, was a force of nature. She had the most damaging versions of the video taken down through a mix of legal threats and calling in favors Henrietta didn't ask about. She also sent a cease and desist to Peter Banks's lawyers when they floated the idea of a defamation countersuit. The message was clear: this fight will cost you more than it's worth. Peter's world continued to crumble. The board of his company asked for his resignation. The Champagne Gate scandal was a PR poison his disruptor brand couldn't survive. Henrietta watched his fall from a distance, feeling not vindication but a hollow unease. His punishment was total, financial, and very public. It felt disproportionate to the crime of being a cruel, drunken fool. One afternoon, a courier delivered a plain envelope to her at the Clarendon. Inside was a check for $25,000 drawn from Peter Banks's personal account. A post-it note was stuck to it, in messy handwriting. No strings, just take it. Catherine confirmed it was legitimate, part of a confidential settlement to avoid further legal action. Henrietta deposited it into a new savings account she labeled Rosa and the Future. She felt like a thief. Frederico kept his distance. She saw him once, across the hotel lobby, deep in conversation with the general manager. He caught her eye, gave the slightest nod of acknowledgement, and continued his meeting. The message was clear. The offer was genuine, the job was hers on merit, and he was not her patron. This unsettled her more than if he'd demanded something. The debt was undefined, and therefore limitless. The advocacy group started as a weekly meetup in a back room of a library. 3 other hotel employees came, then 7, then a bartender from across town. They shared stories, the groping hands, the screamed insults, the withheld tips. Mostly, Henrietta listened. Her own story hung in the room, a dark, famous fairy tale. It gave her a credibility she wasn't sure she deserved.
One evening, after a meeting, a young bellman named Leo lingered. He said, "My mom saw the video," he said, shuffling his feet. She said it was good someone like you was here, that maybe things could change." Henrietta walked home that night under a drizzle, Leo's words echoing. She had wanted to be invisible, then she had wanted justice. Now she was becoming a symbol, and the weight of it was immense. She had money, safety, and a growing platform, but as she turned the key to her still modest apartment, a chilling question settled in her gut. When you become the face of a fight you didn't choose, how do you know you're still fighting for yourself and not just for the story everyone else needs you to be? Henrietta's words lingered in the office long after she left. Frederico sat motionless, her report open on his desk. The numbers were impressive, but it was her final challenge that echoed, actively creating the world you want to live in. For decades, his world had been of boundaries, of reacting to transgressions with precise, often brutal consequence. He had been a wall against chaos. He was asking him to be a foundation for something better. He thought of Elena, not with the usual crushing grief, but with a sharper, more painful clarity. She hadn't just wanted to stop bad things from happening. She'd wanted to build a classroom where every child felt seen. Henrietta, in her practical, unstoppable way, was building a hospitality industry where every worker felt respected. They were builders, not just guards. The realization was a quiet, profound shame. He picked up the phone. "Roberto, draft a proposal. We're funding the Dignity First program's expansion to every major hotel and restaurant group in the city, full backing. And schedule a meeting with the Restaurant Association. We're establishing a new code of conduct." On the other side of the city, Peter Banks stared at the ceiling of a rented apartment. The sale of his remaining shares had left him comfortable but irrelevant. The money was ashes. He'd become a cautionary tale, a meme. He'd tried to reach out to Henrietta once, through Catherine Chen, a rambling email about understanding now, about wanting to help. He'd received no reply. His punishment wasn't poverty, it was obscurity. He was the man who'd sprayed the waitress. That was his entire biography. Henrietta walked through the bustling hotel lobby she now helped run. A new concierge, a young man she'd trained, handled a demanding guest with calm professionalism. The guest's raised voice lowered, a grudging respect entering the exchange. It was a small victory. It was everything. She received a notification, an email from the city's business council inviting her to speak about workforce dignity, another from a journalism student asking for an interview. The requests never stopped. The invisible girl was now a voice, and the weight of that was a responsibility she carried every day. She thought of the hundreds of messages she'd received from servers, cleaners, and cashiers. "You gave me the courage to report my manager. I asked for my correct tip and got it. I walked out." Her story had become a tool in their hands. That was the real transformation, not her suit or her title, but the fact that her humiliation had been metabolized into someone else's strength. This story began with a splash of champagne and a room full of laughter. It ends with a question for you. When you watched Henrietta get humiliated, who did you see? Just a waitress? A victim? Or did you see the person she was, someone's sister, someone's dreamer, someone worthy of basic respect? We live in a world that often teaches us to look away, to stay silent, to be grateful for our own safety when cruelty finds someone else. Henrietta's story is a fracture in that silence, but stories fade unless we give them voice. You can close this tab and move on with your day. The algorithm will feed you something else. This moment will pass, or you can make it matter. Like this story if it made you feel something: anger, empathy, the chilling recognition of a power dynamic you've seen or lived. Subscribe if you believe narratives about dignity, class, and quiet power deserve a platform. Turn on notifications because the conversation shouldn't end here. What happens next to Henrietta, to the countless real people in her shoes, depends on whether we choose to bear witness or look away. The bell is right there. Ring it. Be the person in the room who doesn't stay silent.